Okay, Phil, thank you for agreeing to meet with me today.
You're welcome.
Before we start and focus on your actual your current position and some of your kind of stories from the past, could you just give me a bit of a background of your kind of past marketing and sales roles?
Yeah, okay. I basically started life out as a registered nurse, orthopaedic trauma. Quickly went into a job within sales as a regional salesperson for a medical company. Stayed with that company for 12 years, going up through the ranks, selling different products to become a regional director of sales. Then got headhunted by a Japanese organisation and became head of sales and marketing for them. Worked briefly for a defibrillator company, and also a company that do surgical gloves, gowns and surgical drapes and theatre packs. So a broad, wide-ranging section of the medical industry, dealing with both with the NHS and private sectors.
Also interesting, two private and public sectors there. And what's your current role? What are you currently doing?
I've decided recently to go back into nursing, and I'm currently working as an intensive care nurse within one of the local hospitals.
Excellent. Well, let's explore some of your kind of background, some of the past really. Was there a difference really between when you used to sell to the public and private sector?
I would say that the private sector were more cost conscious, more price conscious, and perhaps were slightly less interested in the clinical positives of a product. Really, if it was seen to do a job, then they may be more inclined to go with a lesser expensive product, even though perhaps it didn't really give you as good results. So I think they were probably more cost conscious and certainly more unit cost driven.
You should think it'd be the other way around really. When you think of the NHS, you'd think they'd be quite cost effective and the private sector would be...
You would, and I don't know if that's because the NHS, the managers aren't actually spending their own money, or whether or not they're not bonused in the same way, but it was certainly a complex market, and while I can't say it was the same in every private hospital, that was the my general experience across the board. So distinctly two different beasts, and they really felt different.
What about when kind of decision making, would that differ between public and private sector?
Private sector tended to be quicker. Obviously there were less key decision makers, so in terms of stakeholders, the NHS was far more complex, and that you had to sell on different levels to different people, be it financially to the chief executive or to the financial director, and slightly differently to the clinicians, the doctors and the unit managers, who were of course nurses. So and within the private sector it was predominantly business managers who would really take that proposition forward, and you were kept away from the clinical interface.
What about time though? Would time differ between public and private, or is it?
Oh, greatly. I mean, just to give you an idea, within the NHS I went to spend 3 years trying to secure a deal to save a trust 1.2 million, which you would have thought they'd have really jumped at and had it closed within a few weeks. And within the private sector it was really, perhaps 3 months in order to get things rolling and get things signed off. So there was a far more absolute focus on business results, and they were far more interested in the numbers rather than the efficacy clinically of any product.
What about kind of decision making? Would there be more kind of or gatekeepers or more different?
Lots of gatekeepers that kept me on my toes, which was interesting. Again, within the NHS, because it is so complex, it would be multifaceted, so you would have the procurement department, who would then usually have a clinical lead. They then in turn would have a subcommittee that would meet and represent various clinicians within the NHS structure of the hospital, and of course each NHS hospital would be structured differently. So you don't really have any base framework on which to work to. So that could change from one hospital to another.
So for example, if the Nottinghamshire Primary Care Trust would have a different hierarchy or a different number of roles compared to maybe North or Staffordshire Primary Care Trust.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what about the private sector? How many kind of gatekeepers or roles would you go through?
Well, that's very interesting because when they first emerged, say the boot hospitals, just as a group off the top of my head, decision making would be done quite regionally. Within a short period of time, got condensed down to one central buying unit, and I guess they wanted to try and achieve economies of scale and also standardise. So standardisation was pretty much the common type of vernacular thrown across the boardroom table at, after a couple of years, in order to put down on pricing pressures and increase their margins, I guess.
Interesting. What about office politics or politics within, not politics obviously like nationally, but office politics or regional politics? Does that ever play a role within?
Yeah, absolutely, greatly. I once was asked to achieve a double-digit growth on a product, a warming blanket that's used in operating theatres.
Both public and private?
Both public and private. We had about roughly £6-7 million worth of sales per annum, so it was a good proportion of business to have. Our competitors had a slightly different product that made them favourite at the time. I was asked to achieve a double-digit growth for the next year. And I pointed out the fact that if we had this slight alteration to the product, which had costed out at a $100,000 investment, would have opened the market up to roughly about another £15 million.
Nothing really in terms of return on investment.
Return on investment, I think you jump at the chance. In order to keep the customers that we had to offer them concessions based on a 1 or 2 or 3 year contract. In my mind, I had to keep all the business that I had in order for the new product to be prototype tested. So I gave a discount, volume-related discount, to tie these customers in. This went to the highest level within the organisation. However, 9 months down the line, when I asked how the prototypes were going, I was told that this wasn't going to actually, and never had been, a consideration. Unbelievable, and it kind of decimated our margins that had been, signed off at the highest level. So it just shows you that office politics and politics per se within organisations, which are ever shifting, can acutely affect your business and your day-to-day running. And I was told that as the business director, I was acutely responsible for that, and that any mistake that was made would be accountable to me.
Did you ever, obviously, did this affect the relationships you had with the public and private sector?
Well, it did, because you essentially selling it certainly into the NHS and the private sector, ethics and being honourable and being truthful to your word is what builds those long-term relationships. And if you have then been seen to not be truthful or to do a U-turn on what you've said, then it's such a great cost. And if you lose a contract, you may not be invited in for another, certainly 3 years, but people usually stay within hospitals for many, many years. So yeah, that did have a big impact, but I was honest at the beginning of the process, and I had to then go and meet with them and give them an honest update.
In terms of kind of networking and kind of forming relationships with potential or existing clients, the way you kind of approach your clients, Did that differ dependent on whether they were private or public?
Not so much private or public. For any of you that's got an interest in sales, there are certain personality types that you can use by using open and closed questioning. So we would profile our clients within that way, and then organise our questioning skills in order to play to their particular personality or interest or strengths or weaknesses. So it really came down to the individual and what personality type they were.
So you really played like a relationship marketing perspective, but on a one-to-one basis?
Individual basis.
Wow. So that's great then. I didn't expect that either.
It was good fun.
Yeah, I can imagine.
At times.
Some good nights out and some good meals and that sort of thing.
One or two.
We're nearly there at the end now, but you did mention something about culture before we switched on, and obviously did culture play a part within your organisation? You said it was a Japanese company. Did that have an effect on how you operated? And
very much so. I had been with the company for 12 years. I got headhunted, and the organisational culture was an absolute stark contrast to one which I had imagined. On my period of due diligence, I'd been to visit the organisation, had a couple of meetings. However, it transpired that I'd had to keep a diary which was open to the scrutiny of my manager and everybody within the company, down to a 10-minute window.
Really?
And also input the times when I left the house within my own time. And this to me was quite intrusive, both on a personal level. And the reply that I got, or the feedback, when I said, why would you like to know what time I set off in the morning? You know that I set off at 4 a.m. Would be, well, it shows the Japanese that you're giving more than what's for. So that was a very interesting insight into perhaps how cultural differences in terms of organisational culture can really have a very real effect on the way that you work and the way that you think about a company.
Did this then kind of translate to kind of the work practices and dealing with clients then?
Well, it was a stark contrast because they prided themselves on professionality, which they were. However, the organisation wasn't incredibly happy when some of the local representatives shared with some of their customers that they'd had trackers put in their cars.
Oh, really?
And that quite disgusted the customers within the NHS. You think about freedom and rights to work and this kind of thing, and there was definitely a shift in terms of opinion with many of the customers that we worked with. I must say, it certainly wasn't what I was expecting, and I must say I wasn't there for many years.
Yeah, very surprising. And finally, do you have any kind of advice for any budding students studying kind of organisational behaviour, by behaviour? I would certainly say that sales and selling skills is absolutely fantastic. I think that if you can get marketing behind you as well to try and have a dual role, I would really advise that, because there's a great saying within the commercial sector: you're only as good as your last sale. And I think that if you run into hard times, having a marketing background or something with a more a hard qualification serves you far better. I certainly enjoyed having the clinical background, which is a great comfort, because you can, if you choose an organisation that doesn't fit with you, find yourself out in the cold very, very quickly. So the times can be great, but the times can also be a lot of hard work and cause you some sleepless nights. I can only imagine. Well, thank you very much for your time, and we hope to welcome you back to NTU in the future.
Okay,
thank you very much.
All the best.